Well, Flight Sim World is dead. Yeah, I know, old news. It took me this long to decide upon exactly what I wanted to say on the matter. Well, here we go. So, what killed Flight Sim World? The short answer is the same thing that kills any other project. It cost more to make than it made back with sales. That's the short of it. Christ knows how much money it cost to make Flight Sim World exactly, but the numbers Flight Sim World was pulling in are honestly chicken shit. They're bad by indie game standards. In fact, here is a Hat in Time as a comparison. So the decision to off it was probably a sound one. As much as it pains me to say that, put in the same position, I probably would have done it too. When you're running a project or a company, sometimes you have to make the tough decision. Killing a project can be tough, and being able to do it is a skill most don't actually have. Canceling a project does not necessarily mean the project failed, but all failures are canceled. The longer answer is, I think the real killer of Flight Sim World was flight simming itself. Not early access, at least not entirely. I do think both the flight sim industry and the community has some blame to share, but despite everything I'm about to say, none of it alone would be able to kill a game. Flight Sim World's death is mostly the fault of its development studio and the decisions they made during its development. But it is not helped by these matters. First impressions are hard to overcome. Everyone's first impression of Flight Sim World was FSX 2.0 with less airplanes. That's not a good one to have. To be fair, if you were to look at Flight Sim World now, you could hardly call it FSX 2.0, but still, it's not a good first impression. The decision to release with an early access model comes with a big cost. In game design, you only get one release. One big day to make your game count. You will never again get the same amount of attention from press or consumers. Early access allows studios to recoup development costs while the game is still being made, but the price is your one and only release day. People will remember their first impression of your game. It's a big risk, and the vast majority of the time it does not pay off. But I don't think that was the issue. There have been enough success stories to determine the marks of a good early access studio, and Dovetail did display these marks. I don't think the early access is what killed it, but the poor first impression certainly did not help matters. The real fatal flaw with Flight Sim World was this, and this, and this. It's clear from the moment you boot up the game that it was built to sell DLC, not built to stand on its own. For this next bit, I feel the need to differentiate here. When I say Flight Sim community, I'm referring to the consumers, the people who purchase and play flight sims and their add-ons. When I say Flight Sim industry, I'm referring to the add-on developers, but not the sim developers. There is a big difference between developing a flight sim and making an add-on for one. It's helpful to think of Lockheed, Lamner, Dovetail, Eagle Dynamics, and all the other sim devs on a separate tier from the add-on devs. They do way more work and have way more competition to contend with. An add-on dev just has to compete with other add-on devs, and frankly, that's not hard. A sim dev is, by definition, a game dev and has to compete with all the other game studios, including the big boys. Many a game has been developed that tried the marketplace thing. Almost all of them failed. The few that didn't are limited to MMOs and mobile games. Let's look at Cities. Take Cities. This is an amazing game. And yes, it has freeware mods, as well as payware DLC, aka add-ons. But the game itself is good enough without them that I and many others still play it. I have not bought any of the DLC for Cities. The game is good enough without it. I don't need it. That doesn't mean I don't want the DLC. The reason I haven't bought it yet is really just down to the fact that I don't play Cities enough to justify purchasing the DLC. I tend to take long breaks with Cities. I'll play it religiously for a few weeks and then just it's dead to me for a few months, and then I come back. That's my playing habit with Cities, so when you play it like that, there's no need for the DLC. The fatal flaw with Flight Sim World was it was built to sell DLC, and no matter if you're a flight sim, a city builder, or a first-person shooter, that will scare players away every time. But as much as I don't like the built-to-be-a-store model, I also can't blame Dovetail or anyone else for thinking that could work in the flight sims. After all, the flight sim community spends its time talking more about the add-ons than they do about the game. The first words out of anyone's mouth when the idea of a new flight sim comes up is add-on. Can we really blame anyone for coming to this conclusion? I don't think so. The sim community itself demonstrates they want add-ons. Their actions and buying habits show they care little for the base platform. What does the death of Flight Sim World mean? Well, firstly, what's going to happen to Flight Sim World itself? The game and all its DLC is going to be removed from the market, which is a shame. Now, you can still purchase it for now, but come the end of May, it's goodbye forever. That's probably the worst thing about this. I understand it did not make its money back, but if it were me, I would release it as free-to-play and drop the DLC price by half. A lot of work went into Flight Sim World, and it's a shame to see it be wasted. At least this way, people can still try it. And you know, we could use an entry-level sim. Something that's low cost and good enough to teach the basics and get your feet wet. Flight Sim World could fill that role perfectly. If you did buy Flight Sim World, don't worry though. It's not money down the drain. Flight Sim World and any DLC you have for it will remain in your Steam library. You will still be able to play it in the future should you choose. But what about the IP itself? What does Dovetail plan on doing with it? Well, the obvious answer would be to sell the IP, but it may not be that simple. Remember, Flight Sim World included products made by third parties. The airplanes were from Coronado and Alibedo, products from Orbex and A2A were also there, and then there's True Sky. The license agreements with all these assets would have to include a clause allowing the ownership to transfer with the sale of the IP. Some people have stated they want Dovetail to sell the IP to Lockheed Martin. Guys, I don't think Lockheed really wants it, and honestly, I don't want them to have it. I can think of companies who would be much better suited to have the Flight Sim World IP than Lockheed. While I'm on the subject, no, Dovetail is not and cannot package True Sky into an add-on and sell it for P3D. Even ignoring the licensing issues with that is not how True Sky works. True Sky has to be integrated in the source code. You can't sell that as an add-on. Only games that run on Unity or Unreal 4 have any plug-and-play compatibility with True Sky, and even then, it still requires work from the developers to get everything functioning. You can't just drop the files in as if it were your favorite Rex add-on. The fact that some people were asking for that both before and after Flight Sim World was canceled, it shows the community really doesn't know how this stuff works very well, do they? Now back on the subject of selling the IP. I know the vast majority of flight simmers don't play other games and probably don't know much about the gaming industry. Generally speaking though, companies tend to keep their IPs. Sometimes they change hands, obviously Bayonetta is one example. But generally speaking, even if they have no plans for the IP, most publishers will sit on them. It's sad but true. What about flight simming itself? Well, I am now more convinced than ever that flight simming is never going to leave the early 2000s. Seriously, we better get comfortable with X-Plane and P3D because they and their problems are all we are going to get. Not until a developer comes along that can both tell third-party add-on devs to eat it and release a game so good we don't need the add-on devs to begin with. I think the industry of flight sim add-ons has some blame for Flight Sim World's death. Anyone remember the scathing words from PMDG before Flight Sim World came out? I think PMDG was trying to kill any interest in the new game before it had its chance. Honestly, they should suck on an APU exhaust pipe and let the community decide if the sim is good or not. Now, who can blame PMDG? They did stand to lose big. After all, they do charge triple digits for DLC on their own stores. but Dovetail wanted everyone selling through Dovetail channels. PMDG would have to take a smaller cut of the profits and most likely charge a lower price. There's no way they would allow them to sell triple-digit DLC on Steam. The bad press that would get thrown Dovetail's way would be insane. That's the kind of shit that gets you your own Jimquisition episode. But if that was too much, then PMDG should just not sell for Flight Sim World. No one was going to force them. There was no need for a public crying fest. You know, the sim community reeks of hypocrisy sometimes. It's bad when Dovetail focuses on DLC instead of the game. And it is. But is it any different from the current state of affairs? Most of the DLC for Flight Sim World was made not by Dovetail, but by third-party devs. The same products are available for FSX, P3D, and X-Plane. The only thing that changed was who you buy it from. Buying it from Dovetail came with its own benefits over the traditional stores. The price was often lower and came with a refund policy, something that most add-on devs lack. I think the death of Flight Sim World forces us to ask a tough question. Is it fair for the add-on developers to make top dollar off of the sim developers platform? Now, before you answer that question, think of this. Can we honestly blame Microsoft for Flight? Can we blame Dovetail for Flight Sim World? Remember one very important thing. The Sims are their games. They are fully within their rights to say who can and can't make add-ons for it. A company having the rights to do as it pleases is something quite a few in the sim community love to repeat like a broken record whenever criticism is leveled towards their favorite devs. Now, having the right does not make you right, but still, is it fair for add-on devs to charge triple digits for DLC that requires a $60 game they do not make, and at the same time, many of them release a broken, buggy product, include some seriously bullshit DRM, have no refund policy, and at least one gave their own customers malware, all while being extremely rude to their own customers? Think about the malware bus incident. That was the first news story from flight simming to get that big. Probably the first time a lot of people were exposed to this crazy thing called flight sims. And we looked like assholes. Incompetent assholes at that. That could very easily have scared off potential customers for the different sims. Not just P3D or FSX, but X-Plane, DCS, Aerofly, all of them. I ask again, is it fair? Seriously, in my video on the malware bus, I said it may be risky for sim developers to continue allowing add-on devs the amount of freedom they currently enjoy. After what FS Labs did, think about if you were Microsoft selling a flight sim, would you want them associated with your product? I would not want them associated with mine. Would you want them making that DLC for your game, being rude to your customers? Remember, what they did will reflect onto you. It's your game and your ass on the line. They charge triple the price of your product, while doing nothing to further its development. Lamner and Lockheed could announce tomorrow that there will be no more payware add-ons for their games, and there is not thing one anybody could do about it. And I honestly think they should to some extent. You can bet that if I was making a flight sim, I would have a licensing program in place, and if someone wanted to make payware add-ons, they had to agree to some terms. And if any of those terms were broken, then they could be shown the door. Rest assured, there will not be a new sim without something like that. Lamner may be too late to implement that, and Lockheed probably doesn't care. But no new sim will ever come out without something similar. I read a comment on an article about Flight Sim World's cancellation. The comment basically said that the add-on devs decide which sim is successful. No new developer would ever agree to letting another company that contributes nothing get more profit off of their platform than they themselves get. The add-on devs need the sim devs more than the sim devs need them. If we truly want a new flight sim with top-of-the-line features, it's going to take giving the add-on devs the middle finger. And I think it's time the current sim devs remind everyone who owns these products and whose sandbox the add-on devs are flinging mud in. And before anyone says the add-on devs attract customers, no, they really don't. No one went to X-Plane because it had add-ons. No, people went to X-Plane 11 because it was giving them what they wanted while P3D wasn't and FSX was stagnant. That's why people went to X-Plane 11, and it was only when people started going to X-Plane 11 that we really saw add-on devs start making add-ons for it. At the end of the day, the consumers are what drive this hobby. The community drives this hobby because we're the ones with the money, not the add-on devs. They follow us. When you look at how DCS World is graphically better than any civil flight sim. Its physics are better, and its price is better too. Yes, there is paid DLC for it. Almost all of the paid DLC planes are higher quality than anything the best developer ever made for a civil flight sim. The 7-year-old A10 alone does more than anything any payware dev ever made for P3D. And they do all of this while charging half the price. We could and should have this in civil flight sims too. And I'm willing to bet the reason it works that way in DCS World is because Eagle Dynamics doesn't let their third-party add-on devs have as much freedom as the ones on X-Plane and FSX enjoy. After the malware bus fiasco, I hope Lamner and Lockheed thought long and hard about the freedom they are giving third-party developers. Their actions reflect onto you, and they are making not insignificant amounts of money off of your product while doing no work to further its development. And all the while, they're pissing off your customers and probably turning away future ones. Remember, a game that is DLC heavy will almost always scare off players. Flight sims are no exception to this rule. If something like Farm Sim can pull in numbers like this, there is no reason a flight sim can't do the same. Side note, Farm Sim does have DLC, but it's nothing compared to what flight sims have, and the prices are a lot better. The patience of the community is not infinite, and when one day a developer does come along that delivers a platform that can compete with yours and has default aircraft that rival what the payware devs put out, the people will remember the bullshit. And that's really not going to be fair for the sim devs. That's not going to be fair at all. The answer to every time I asked if it was fair is no. It's not fair. I cannot blame Microsoft for Flight. I cannot fault Dovetail for Flight Sim World. Nor would I be able to blame Lamner or Lockheed if they told add-on devs to frack off entirely. The future of the hobby itself may require it. Remember, it may be risky for the sim developers to continue allowing add-on devs to do as they please. The malware bust proved that. Another scandal happens that gets to that size, and I think the sim devs will have to step in for their own good. When an industry demonstrates it cannot be trusted to police itself, that's when higher powers step in and police it for them. The people claim to want a new sim made by a developer with a modern engine using modern code, and even want it to be made by a AAA dev, some of them anyway, which honestly, I think is more likely than some people realize. But if this were to occur, no new dev or publisher will allow the status quo to exist with their platform. Ain't no way in hell, especially not a AAA studio. Now, I know I kind of went on a rant about add-ons and bullshit here, but honestly, this seemed like the best time to talk about it. The death of Flight Sim World kind of forces me to bring that up. I mean, Dovetail, that whole thing with Dovetail and add-ons before Flight Sim World came out, I honestly think that was to get ahead of anything like the malware bus and stop that from happening. I honestly think that was part of it. Okay, the real motivation was probably just money, 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 but it would have that benefit. I'm actually... I kind of out of stuff to say now. I'm actually going off script right now. I'm sad Flight Sim World has died because it really was very good. I mean, it didn't start out that way, God no, but I mean, if Flight Sim World were to come out today, if it didn't come out when it did, if it delayed it a year and came out now, I think it would have done better. I don't think it would have done... I don't think the features alone would have been enough to save it, but I do think it would have done better. It would have had a better first impression at the very least. And I am kind of sad we're never going to get to see the stuff they were working on now. They were working on a jet. Like, people kept wanting jets. Jets were coming. In fact, there was a Citation 2 due to be released in June, and I think it was going to be... If I'm reading stuff correctly, it was going to be included as a default plane. It wasn't going to be a DLC. So the jets were coming. There were improvements to the flight planner coming, as well as IFR stuff. I don't know what the heck they actually meant by IFR, but that was coming too. And now we're never going to see it. You know, and True Sky is the thing I miss the most, because that was really a game changer with what that did. Like, holy cow, I can't stress enough the things that True Sky was capable of delivering that the Sims really, really could use. But that's not going to happen now. Oh well. That's what I think about the death of Flight Sim World. Rest in peace, Flight Sim World. You really were not that bad.
Holy crap.
I killed myself trying to kill Freddy.
Well, there's gotta be like 20 freaking Skyhawks out there.
Oh my god. Is that what that was?
What the hell? Incoming!
M61 Vulcan Gatling gun, 20 mil.
I was like, you said you were passing over me, and I'm like, oh, okay, are you going apart in midair?
No, I'm passing.
Oh man, I'm missing out. I'm still 15 miles out.
Alright. Zero, circle back around and fire at Roto.
I'm clear at 16.
Dead on the ground. What do you want me to do? I crashed trying to kill Freddy there.
Yep, karma, man.
You're doing it wrong.
Well, I had to pitch the plane down just to get the guns to bear on you. And I was low to the ground. That wasn't the smartest thing I've done.